And welcome everyone back to Let's Talk Broncos, brought to you by Mile High Sports. You can follow us all on Twitter at Mile High Sports, the LTB podcast, Bree0322, JR Drafts, and Zach_Seegers. You can find all of Zach and Joey's excellent work on milehighsports.com, and you can listen to any of our previous episodes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get all of your information. Don't forget to subscribe to our new YouTube channel. If Facebook or Instagram is your thing, you can find us there too. I want to start off the evening by asking my lovely co-hosts, Zach, Joey, how are you both doing this evening?
I'm doing good. I had a really good day, a chill day, nothing too crazy. I got ahead of schedule yesterday, so I was able to get a little more prepared than usual, which is good. We'll see how it goes. Zach, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this stuff. We're coming out of the cold, dark winter of the NFL, and things are starting to get rolling again, and I'm really, really excited for that. Got a Ty in the chat. Hey, Ty. Just excited to talk about these defensive players. This defense is one I'm really excited to watch this season. I think it's going to be a pretty good product.
Absolutely. I want to remind anybody watching on Twitter that you need to jump on over to the YouTube or the Facebook streams, which is linked in the thread, so you can get your questions and comments highlighted on the screen, much like Ty did just then. Hi, Ty. How are you doing? While you're over there, make sure to like and subscribe, share the stream, or you can turn on the notifications if you feel so obliged. Before we get started, Zach already really alluded to what we're doing here. We're going to break down, much like we did offensive training camp battles, with the defensive side. So before we get started, just want to let everyone know that's what we're doing tonight. And we're going to start off with a pretty important position for this upcoming Broncos secondary. It's going to be the safety position. So going into training camp, that's going to be starting later this month. We're just a couple of days out, really. It looks two weeks to be exact. KJack is back. And what does that mean for the impressive Caden Stearns, who made quite the impression on Broncos country last season with Jackson inactive? So KJack has been an undeniable impact on this team, on and off the field, to help drive the development of the younger guys and implement new systems. The roster is uniquely balanced as such. So what does the starting safety role look like here? And does it begin to shift over to the younger Stearns? Joey, what are you seeing here with the safety position?
Yeah, you know what? Before I get into that, I would like to just start with how much I love Kareem Jackson. He's like always that one of the players that when I watch, it just reminds you of how crazy and mental you have to be to play NFL football. Like, he is not that big of a guy, and the way he comes downhill and hits folks is just insane, right? That's just Kareem Jackson's MO. But yeah, I think he's getting up there in age. The Broncos have signed him to 1-year deals back to back, which kind of tells you what their plan is there. They want to get younger at that position. Caden Stearns is that guy. He came in last year, impressed everybody a lot more than I think we all had expectations. So I think they do end up going the Caden Stearns route a little more. I don't think that means Kareem Jackson's role completely evaporates. I just don't. They brought him back. He's great insurance for a Caden Stearns, but I do think Caden Stearns sees more time at that safety position than he did last year, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I don't think it's going to be as simple as Stearns is the starting safety or Kareem Jackson's the starting safety. And I think that applies to a lot of the battles we'll talk about on offense and defense. But this one especially. We kind of have that Madden mindset of like, this player's starting, so they're starting. And I think it will be situational. It will depend on what package is on the field. But in terms of nickel and dime packages, which are the new base in the NFL, it seems like Evero especially wants to lean into that dime stuff. I think it's going to be Caden Stearns out there as the go-to guy. I think he's just better in coverage at this point, frankly, or at least has the potential to be. We didn't see a ton of it last year, but he's an elite athlete for the position and is incredibly intelligent. All I heard all season long was like, yeah, Patrick Surtain's great and Javonte Williams is great, but Caden Stearns is not getting enough love. This guy's wowing everyone in the meeting rooms. And I took it to heart. I think this guy's the truth. I think, like Joey said, they clearly kind of want to move in that direction. On the back end of the safety room, looking at Jamar Johnson, PJ Locke, J.R. Reid, and Delarian Turner-Yell, they just signed J.R. Reid, but I think the money there is pretty telling. I don't think they're all that invested there. I think the Jamar Johnson experiment, it was a good swing, but I don't think it's really panned out. And then, De'Aaron Turner-Yell's going to make it as a special teamer, but I think PJ Locke is probably closer to the Stearns-Jackson conversation than he is the J.R. Reid, Jamar Johnson one.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Zach. Ty Walden's in the chat. Although you kind of alluded to it already, how much of a chance do you give Caden Stearns to win the job over KJack?
Yeah, I think Zach kind of hit on it. I don't know if it's as simple as just, hey, this guy's going to win the starting safety job. I think it's going to be more of both guys are going to get their opportunity and play out there. Zach kind of framed it perfectly earlier. I do think they're trying to get younger, as I said, but you brought back Kareem Jackson for a reason, and until he proves he can't play, I'm going to believe that he can. So I think it's going to be somewhat of they're both going to get their opportunity out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that previously, when you're talking about a veteran coming in and being able to kind of elicit those sort of reactions you want from the younger crew, Justin Simmons speaks very highly of Kareem Jackson. And he just stated, quite recently, just an example that he is for Simmons personally as a player and the rest of the roster. I think it's just it speaks so highly of who Kareem Jackson is as a person, very selfless with what he brings to the table, both on and off the field. Zach, did you have something?
Absolutely. To answer Ty's question, I think there's an 80 to 90% chance that when we're here at the end of the season, and feel free to come or write this down and come back at me with this come January. I think there's an 80 to 90% chance that Caden Stearns has more snaps in this defense, more snaps at safety than Kareem Jackson. Joey's point, I'll believe it when I see it. I think we kind of started to see it last year. I think the signs were kind of there. It wasn't fully there, but I think the early warning signs were there plenty. And I think Kareem Jackson's still going to be a valuable part of this defense, and he's going to have a role that sees him on the field a good bit. But I think it's going to be Caden Stearns winning that job, and I think it's a near certainty. Now, I don't know how it'll be listed on the depth chart, because I could see maybe in base package, which is how a lot of depth charts are listed, even if it's kind of outdated. I could see KJack being that starter. But in terms of snaps at the position, I feel very confident that's going to go to Caden.
Awesome. We're going to move over just a slot. Let's see what I did there. We're going to talk about cornerbacks next. You got Michael Ojimutia's performance this offseason, and it was quick to draw praise from all of Broncos country. With the newly drafted Mathis, what does this cornerback battle come down to both of you? Zach, what are you going to be looking for here later this month?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to be really looking to see how both of these guys function inside, because I think that's kind of what they're competing for. And I think they can do it. I'm not really worried about, can these guys play in the nickel? I actually think I prefer Mathis there, but we haven't really seen it from either of them. Ojemudia too, he's long been talked about. Is he a safety? Is he a cornerback? I think if they're going to want to get on the field, it's probably as that dime corner. I think we'll see some of the safeties drop into that role plenty. But that's probably the easiest path to snaps, is being able to play on the inside, because Surtain and Darby have the outside locked down pretty clearly. K1 has that first slot locked in, but that second slot spot is kind of open and should rotate around through a few people. So I want to see who can play inside. Can Ojemudia do it? Can Mathis do it? And I think whoever performs better there is probably going to see more snaps in season. I'm also just excited to see, does Ojemudia look like what we saw last training camp? Because last training camp was a super promising performance from Ojemudia. Of course, had the nasty injury, came back at the end of last season, looked really promising. I just want to see a little more, to have a little more confidence that week 18 Ojemudia is going to be 2022 2022 Ojemudia.
Yeah,
return to form.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joey, go ahead.
No, yeah, I just think, this is interesting, because I think that they're both reserved. I'm not sure that they're listing them on the depth chart is interesting, because I think that Mathis, in my opinion, is going to be the better inside player, while Ojemudia is going to be the better outside player. And I wouldn't say that there's any separation in them on the depth chart because of that. They're kind of backing up two different positions, really. It kind of depends on, and that's just my opinion. Who knows? Come training camp, maybe they show something different. But in my brain, that's how I think of it. It's not exactly like we all want to list them in order and stuff like that, but they both probably are listed as like 4 in my head. I don't think one's separated from the other. It just depends where an injury happens, or what personnel package they're in, or where they want to move somebody. There may be a package in their dime defense where instead of putting Matheson, they say, oh, Ojemudia is the better player. Let's scooch Surtain in and put Ojemudia outside. I don't know. There's a lot of different situations that could happen there. So I think it's more of what personnel they get into rather than going straight down the list of who's the better corner, I guess. You're on mute, Zach.
Like freezing and lagging and everything. I fully agree with that. I think my one thing is I feel pretty confident, or I could see Ojemudia having a good bit of success playing on the inside this season. If Damari Mathis would have to go outside, I think he's going to struggle. So I do think the battle to see who can play inside, because if Ojemudia can play better inside too, while I agree, I kind of envision Mathis as that next up inside guy. He is a rookie, and if Ojemudia can prove he can do that at a high level, I think he'll definitely be in consideration for inside snaps if an injury happens to K1.
No doubt about it. I totally agree with you there. If Ojemudia just beats him outright, I guess, yeah, list him above him in the depth chart. It's just like, I guess I'm thinking more of an optimistic, because like in an optimistic point of view, just because I think that they drafted Mathis for that specific niche. I think that's the reason why he was brought in here, is because they want him to fill that void. So that's just the way I think about it. But come training camp, like I said, who knows? Ojemudia might just beat him out inside straight up.
Yeah, I think that's been the consensus among Broncos country Twitter, is that he's still being slept on. Obviously, health is a major concern and a factor there, but what a testament to George Paton in his ability to acquire depth in that secondary. You're going to be able to see a lot of those positional players rotate out and shift over. Joey, I like the way how you said the word scooch. I think that's really appropriate. Go ahead and shift them over just a little bit, be able to piece them in. And you have a lot of that going through a lot of positions here in Broncos country. And the next one we're going to talk about has a lot of that happening right now. In the edge position, you've got a position of need highlighted by most of Broncos country this offseason. Nick Bonitto was selected 64th in last year's draft by George Paton and the Broncos. Was the acquisition enough to bolster the position? So Browning's been shifted or scooched over, to much of the chagrin from various members of the community. And I know we've talked about it ad nauseum. And with the likes of Cooper, Reid, Allen, all available. Joey, what's the outlook on edge and who's coming out on top?
So, yeah, so obviously Bradley Chubb, Randy Gregory, spots are solidified. Those are your two starting edge rushers. Behind that, it's really interesting. Zach sent me a DM earlier reminding me that they brought 5 edge rushers onto the roster last year. So it makes things interesting, because I'm looking at 4 names here that I think, I mean, there's a battle, right? Nick Bonitto, second-round pick. He's definitely solidified on the roster, no doubt about it. Baron Browning, second-round pick last year, no doubt about it. The real question here is between Jonathan Cooper and Malik Reid. That's the big one. And I think Jonathan Cooper's the better player. That's who I would go with there. And then who is the actual backup between Nick Bonitto, Baron Browning, and Jonathan Cooper? Guys, I need to see. I thought Baron Browning was good. I saw his snaps at edge at Ohio State, and he looked really good. But let's wait until we see it in the NFL level. That's my one thing about scooching him over to edge, is that it's just like I haven't seen it yet. So making this full position change is scary. It's really scary to me, and I don't know. He's in pretty tough to project at this point from a player that hasn't seen a ton of him. I'll rely on the coaching staff here and say he's going to be a really good edge rusher, because moving him from where he was to edge rusher, you're banking on him not just being okay edge rusher, but really good, because that's what he was at inside linebacker. So I would say Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper, and then Nick Bonitto kind of spells in for some pass rush situations.
Ooh, interesting. I like, and you might be right there. I think Bonitto, man, that's interesting. Yeah, you know what? I think the more I think about it, I think you might be right there that it is Bonitto over Cooper, or the other way around, Cooper over Bonitto, just this rookie year. And you see Bonitto really, assuming there's an injury, considering Jonathan Cooper's ability as a run defender. But you'll have Bonitto as that pass rushing specialist and really allow him to thrive as he, I think, adjusts to the NFL game. And while he is adjusting, I do think it's going to be Baron Browning in like that number one top premier spot, because they have invested, in my opinion, more in Baron Browning than any of these other depth guys. Obviously, Bonitto's the higher draft pick, but I was thinking about it. It's like the bird in the hand versus the bird in the bush. You took a known commodity, a known good linebacker, and are turning him into an edge. That's a greater investment, in my opinion, than a back end of the very last second round pick in the draft. So yeah, I think that's a pretty sizable swing. So I think it's going to be Browning, and then probably Cooper, and then I think Reid probably gets cut. Allen is on the practice squad, and Nick Bonitto's that pass rushing specialist that I do think we'll see a good bit of playing time, keep everyone fresh there. I also think you're going to keep Browning. The one other point I wanted to add, the inside linebacker depth chart is pretty shaky after you, like, Singleton's your number 3, and after that it falls off a cliff. So I think Browning is going to see some hybrid work, especially if there's an injury there. So I think that helps justify carrying 5 edges on the active roster. The one other point, Frankie had a question here about the corners. I think asking about, the depth, how do Bless on Austin and Faion Hicks fit in? I think they're probably practice squad guys or competing for a practice squad. There's one back end spot of the roster at cornerback that I think a lot of names will be battling for, and I don't have much to say on them, except I think Donnie Lewis Jr. was the best of that bunch at like OTAs and minicamp. But OTAs and minicamp, I think, are going to play such a small role in who ends up winning that job. So I wouldn't put much stock in it. Those guys will all be battling for that one last corner spot.
Yeah, that it's always is receiver and corner. That last spot on the roster is always such a battle, no matter what, because it really is. It's damn near impossible to have a solid 6 of any root position. It's really hard. It's going to be a battle for that last spot, year in, year out, 99% of the time.
I'm either going to chalk it up to ignorance is bliss, or I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not too concerned about Browning and his shift over to the new role. I think that until we see it, we don't have any cause or concern to be worried or overly excited. I think until it plays out, we'll see, but that's kind of my middle of the road and ability to skirt around that line and that issue. And as Zach was touching on earlier on how that could look for the linebackers, we'll move into the next position that we're going to talk about, which would be inside linebackers with Griffith and Singleton. With the departure of Alexander Johnson, who's stepping up this season, Griffith looks like a lock for the roster, and Singleton's production was pretty decent prior to joining the Broncos. Zach, which linebacker here has caught your eye through OTAs, and what's going to happen to prove either or for these two individuals?
Well, you talked about how you're feeling not as concerned about Browning's shift, and I think something that should have all of Broncos country feeling a little less concerned about Browning's shift is Jonas Griffith. We're talking about another, I forget if he's 99th percentile or 98th percentile, but absurd athlete at the linebacker position. We're talking about a 1 in 50 guy or a 1 in 100 guy, either way. So just an absolute standout athlete. And he can do, I think, a lot of the things. His supreme athleticism isn't as movement-based as Browning's, but he can do a lot of the things Browning can. And ease the loss of Browning some. His sample size is a lot smaller. I think that's probably the argument for Singleton. But in my opinion, Alex Singleton is what Broncos country views Josie Jewell as. Not what Josie Jewell is, mind you, but what Broncos country views Josie Jewell as, which is unathletic, a liability in coverage, kind of subpar, super replacement level. And I don't think you need him and Josie Jewell on the field at the same time. I think you're going to want that Jonas Griffith, Josie Jewell pairing, which just like complements each other so well. And I think if Jonas Griffith can produce what he did in a small sample size over the course of an entire season, same goes for Josie Jewell's smaller sample size last year, you're looking at one of the better linebacker tandems in the NFL. Even if it's a no-name tandem and isn't going to be heralded by media people, the ceiling there is sky high.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with everything Zach said pretty much. I think Jonas Griffin has a lot of potential there, and I really like his potential. Alex Singleton is interesting just because I remember some Mike Kliss reports right when he was signed talking about how he would be. It really sounded like he was the Broncos guy, which confused a lot of different people.
And I think the money is telling there, like he signed with Jonas Griffith. Now, Jonas Griffith's not getting paid a lot, but that's just the fact of the exclusive rights free agent deal. For people that don't know, how the ERFA works is if the Broncos want to extend the offer, the player has to accept it, and it's a 1 year, very, very cheap deal. So there's no negotiating there. That's just what Jonas Griffith's getting paid because of his status as an undrafted player, and it's pretty cheap. Alex Singleton, they had to sign as a free agent, and he's getting paid like $200,000 more than Jonas Griffith. I think that's pretty telling. And I just think Jonas Griffith is a much better player and matches the personnel better as well.
Can I ask you both a question? Has hesitancy been an issue for Griffith? And do you find that he maybe isn't approaching with much vision on the ball? Or do you think that that's something that really hasn't shown up in his play the last season?
I think, that was the biggest hole in his game last season during his audition. And that is something he's going to have to prove. I think playing next to Josie Jewell is going to help cover up a lot of those flaws, though, versus playing next to Baron Browning. And Baron Browning was fantastic last year. I think you could argue he was the best inside linebacker for the Broncos, but he was also a rookie who had, his own poor processing moments. He's not the veteran that Josie Jewell is. And really, that's what has made Josie Jewell such a good linebacker is his high football IQ and tackling ability and all that. I think having that kind of captain next to him in the linebacking room should definitely help with that. And also just like getting some playing time. He was a special teamer up until those last 3 games. And then before that played college at Indiana State. It is going to be a bit of a transition for him. And I expect to see him go through a learning curve, but I think he can do it.
So I have a question real quick as well, just adding on this. Let's say I want to kind of go back to Baron Browning a little bit. Let's say that Josie Jewell, who's coming off a season-ending injury, right? So a little bit of a question mark there. I think he'll be fine, but we'll wait and see. Let's say he goes down. Are the Broncos rushing to put Baron Browning back at inside linebacker, do you think? Or do you think now we're just running with Jonas Griffith and Singleton?
What does the edge room look like? Is Bonitto looking good? Is his run defense promising where maybe you feel he can be that next man up? How's Jonathan Cooper looking? And shoot, I forgot to mention this point earlier about Jonathan Cooper. I'm doing a piece researching the Broncos 2021 draft class right now. Jonathan Cooper's rookie year is eerily identical to Trey Hendrickson, except he just slightly outproduced him across the board in very similar snap count and everything. So I think like the ceiling for Cooper's a little higher. Like he's not just a Malik Reid type. He could be a pretty solid, maybe not a star, but just like a good rotational pass rusher. But anyways, how are those other guys looking? Do they give you the confidence at edge that you can move him back to inside linebacker? But I think you are rushing to do it relatively quick because I think the drop off from Josie Jewell to Jonas Griffith is substantial. And then I think the drop off from Jonas Griffith to Alex Singleton, not substantial, but it's a healthy drop. And then the drop from Alex Singleton to whoever that fourth guy is, Barrington Wade, Justin Sternad, it is a sheer cliff face.
Can we talk a little bit about the starter, Josie Jewell? There's 2 comments here in the chat. Grand Desert 12 wanted to know, did I miss your take on Josie Jewell? Zach, can you just touch on him, basically what you're looking forward to seeing out of him this season?
hopefully he stays healthy. He's an awesome linebacker. It kills me that Broncos country has the perception of him that they do. I think he's linebacker one, and you can put it in granite.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how he comes back from injury, right? I'm always a little more hesitant on stuff like that, just because of the injuries. We'll see. But if we get the Josie Jewell that started the season last year, we're rock solid. I thought he started the season last year having his best career yet, or his best season yet, is what it looked like. So we'll see how that works.
The fact it was pectoral though, and early in the season, like injury is always a concern, especially season-ending ones. But I think the fact it was upper body and early in the season it's
better.
With injuries always being a concern, there's definitely something to say about the amount of depth that has been basically just given to every single position on this team. For the most part, I don't want to get too crazy about this, but thanks to Peyton, there's a melee on the defensive line. On the interior guys, you have guys like Deshaun Williams, Mike Purcell, McTelvin Agim, Henningsen, Wazirike, and Spencer. How does that shake out for you? I'm going to go Joey first. What's going to determine the pecking order within the depth in these positions this season?
You know, it's interesting. It's so tough to tell. Some of those bottom of the roster guys, it's really going to come down to training camp. It's hard to really have a prediction, especially with some of these rookies. I think Mike Purcell, I'd keep him around. I think that I just like the idea of being able to go heavy when I feel like I want to go heavy. All of a sudden, Williams, Purcell, I have a big interior defensive lineman, Draymond Jones. I feel great with that. Zach, I want to ask you, man, because I felt like you were a little split and I was a little split at the beginning, but especially you, what is your Awuzurike take?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out with him and Purcell. Like that's a middle. This is all kind of like a mosh pit right here. This six, I kind of broke it up into two tiers, but like McTelvin Agim could be cut and Marquise Spencer could make the roster, and that wouldn't surprise me. Purcell could be cut and Spencer could make the roster. I'm not predicting that to happen, but it wouldn't stun me. I really think it's all kind of a mess down here.
It's
a melee. That's what a melee
within a melee, exactly. With talking about the movie Emil. It's an Emil. It's a melee. I think there's a mini battle there between Wazirike and Purcell. The big-bodied kind of run stuffers. I know Wazirike is more of like a penetrator, but I think he'll be doing some of those multiple gap things. I just don't know if it's weird because Wazirike is like 25. Yeah, but I just don't know if he's ready for that as a rookie. I really think it's going to be when the Broncos want to go to like a heavy run stuffing package. I think it's going to be Purcell and DJ Jones out there with Draymond.
Yeah, it's nice.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just nice to have that flexibility to be able to do stuff like that. And I honestly, like, taking on double teams and stuff like that is such a tall task for a rookie. Like being that nose guard rookie, that's tough. That's not an easy task. You have to be in your NFL body to be able to do that. You can't be, there's a lot of rookies struggle with that task.
Absolutely. Sorry. My bad. Bree, go ahead.
No, your point's going to be much better than mine. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I want to ask you guys a question. I'm
sorry.
So who is who is going to be? So I think there's an obvious top two starters on this group. It's the Jones brothers, Draymond and DJ. But who is going to be that go-to next man up? Is it Deshaun Williams? Is it Mike Purcell? Is it McTelvin Agim with maybe a leap as a run defender? And then also, there's probably going to be 6 players in this room. One of these guys, or 2 of these players actually up here, aren't going to make it. Which 2?
Very tough. I think so I would hope that it's McTelvin Agim just because of where the Broncos drafted him. Now it's been 2 seasons. You want to think that it's going to be him that takes a leap, right? That is just athleticism off the charts, a lot of good things he can do, but the guy he needs to get stronger at the point of attack, and that's one thing that's been consistent since his college tape to now. Just stronger at the point of attack, be a better run defender. The two guys that I'm not so sure about are Henningsen and Spencer. If I were to guess there, that just your lowest amount that you've you've drafted or undrafted free agents, like all these other guys are drafted players or players that have played, they're certified. Henningsen and Spencer, not so much. So I think that's the safest bet.
There's also an additional one that's still active on the roster in Jonathan Kongbo, which I don't think we have listed here. But I would have to agree with Joey. I'm thinking Purcell is probably that third spot. That's what I'm going for. At least that's what I'm rooting for there. It's a really great question. And I think Joey covered the point of it's hard to tell until you see how it's working out through training camp. And then specifically preseason, a lot of that's going to be decided there. So I'm going to wait and see before casting any judgment. But Zach, do you think they shift Spencer and Henningsen to the practice squad? Is that where you see them ending up?
Henningsen for sure. Spencer, I'm just not sure about. He was such a late pick in last year's draft, not Mr. Irrelevant, but like 2 picks off of it, which is arguably even more irrelevant because you don't get to have the parade and all that fun shit. So I think he's in pretty rough shape. He'd be the one I would definitely cross off that list. Henningsen's maybe a practice squad guy. Obviously, the staff and the front office like him. They invested a pick in the guy. I liked him a good bit watching his Wisconsin tape. But the draft investment's greater in Awazurike, so he's probably got the edge there. I think for Henningsen to make the roster, it's going to take something like McTelvin Ajim doesn't take that next leap, and they go, we just can't play this guy if he's such a liability in the run game, and they move on from him. Maybe they trade him or something. Or maybe Purcell shows up, and they're just like, man, we really hoped we were getting old Mike Purcell, but we're not. We don't think it's going to happen. Or maybe Deshaun Williams doesn't look right. It's going to take one of those guys like surprising and not living up to expectations, I think, for Henningsen to make it. So I'm with Joey. I think that's the easy pick there. And then I think Ajim's the ideal option, but I think Deshaun Williams is going to be that next man up and see the third most snaps on that defensive line.
I have a question for the both of you before we get out of here. Last season, and you're talking about run stuffing, that was an issue, if you will, with the last scheme that was being run. We saw a lot of opponents for the Broncos run all over them. Have they made the changes necessary? Do you think, obviously we won't know until we see it play out, but has enough been done to prevent that from happening this upcoming season? Because that's one of my major concerns.
Yeah, I think a big reason why you saw that last year, the games where we really got tore apart was when our linebackers were just absolutely depleted. I remember that Browns game, that was a massive deal that our linebackers weren't playing. There was a lot of games like that where we were just getting torn up by different running backs because of it. So I think that's a big reason. And then you look at the addition of DJ Jones, that's a big deal. And that's why I'm kind of speaking to, I would keep Mike Purcell. I really would. He's your nose guard. And I'm not so sure a rookie can come in and replace him. I want that heavy package. I just like the flexibility of being able to go into it when I want to. If we're getting gashed in the run, that's a big deal, especially if we're playing that 2-shell defense up high and you don't want to bring an extra safety down, you're going to have that package. That's a big deal. So that I do think they've made good additions to fix it. Is it like amazing? No, especially because I think that we took Baron Browning out of inside linebacker, and I would have liked to see him develop more there. But yeah, I think it'll be better than it was last year, surely, because I don't anticipate our linebackers being as hurt as they were last year.
Yeah, I think across the board, or you look at like the big 3 positions, or 4, I'll say like 4 positions that come to mind where I'm like, I really value run defense from those 4 positions. On the defensive line, I think you've gotten considerably better. You added DJ Jones, who's a monster run stuffer. And I think Mike Purcell, hopefully you get a healthy Mike Purcell and the great elite run stuffer Mike Purcell. But even if you don't, I think last year's Mike Purcell can be a valuable contributor as like a rotational zero technique where, hey, we need to stop the run on this play. We're going to put out a heavy package where it's Purcell lined up right on the center, and then the Joneses on either side of him. Like that's a nasty front. I'm excited to see that. The edge rushers, I think you're getting, or at least hopefully you should be getting there from a run defense perspective. You did have the half season of Von Miller, but once he left, you had an injured Bradley Chubb who was not doing much to help you. You had Malik Reid as a key contributor to the run defense. He's not great there. You had a rookie Jonathan Cooper. That should be better across the board. Yes, you are losing Baron Browning from linebacker, but I think he'll help that edge room relative to like Malik Reid and rookie Jonathan Cooper was. A more experienced Jonathan Cooper should be a boost there. Randy Gregory getting hopefully, well, I don't know with his injury history, but he's going to be on the roster at least for the whole season. Unlike Miller, he's a really good run defender. Linebacker, Jonas Griffith, and you're getting Josie Jewell hopefully back for the whole season. That's a huge boost to that unit. And then the like slot corner positions, I think K'Wan Williams as a run defender is an upgrade on Bryce Callahan. And then I think you're going to have KJack dropping down in there, and he's going to be nasty there as well. So like the big 4-5 spots, whatever that come to mind as having a lot of impact on that, stand out to me.
Absolutely. That is a fantastic answer. And I no longer have a rebuttal for that because I feel kind of more calm with the entirety of that. I did want to touch on here with Gren. How much confidence do you have in the first time DC or Coach Evero? I think we've seen particularly from the roster, that they are just thrilled to have him on board. I'll let Zach, do you want to take that? And how confident do you feel?
Yeah, I'm Ejiro Evero's number one hype man. I'm feeling bold and super confident. I think this defense is going to be better under Evero than it was under Fangio. I think if you look at like the surface level performance of this defense last year, it's like, oh, wow, this was pretty good. And I think that was surprising all season long. Like we were watching the product and it wasn't a great product, but you'd look at the metrics and it's like, well, they're only allowing like 19 points per game. Yeah, because they were giving the team the ball only 4 times a game and they would get tough in the red zone, which don't get me wrong, red zone defense is probably the most important part of defense in the modern NFL. But they forced turnovers at a pretty pedestrian rate. They forced punts at a below average rate. They were towards the bottom of the league in the amount of plays per drive they were giving up, the time of possession they were giving up, the amount of first downs they were giving up per drive, their third down defense. It was sneakily a pretty bad defense. You look at advanced metrics like DVOA, they're like 20th and 21st defensively. They were not a great defense last year. The talent was there. The scheme was there. They hated playing for their head coach. The talent's still there. If anything, it's better. The scheme is the same, and all the terminology stuff is being kept intact, as you guys found out on the PJ Locked interview. And now they like their head coach. This defense is going to be awesome. I've got a lot of confidence in Evero.
All right, hold on. My job is to mediate. I know Joey's been biting his tongue. He threw something out there a little bit earlier about anytime he mentions something positive about Vic Fangio, people are coming for him. So, Joey, the floor is yours. Tell me if you have something for that.
I do. I disagree, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, situation matters. If everyone wants to talk about talent, right? And the talent was there until it wasn't, because you have to look at the situations on the field. The Broncos defense had a hell of a lot of injuries last year. Like that's a big deal. The defense was getting ran on, and in that system, when you want to run too high, you can't have your main run defenders out, or you're going to get ran on down your throat consistently. And that's what happened with the Broncos a lot. So that's what's going to force it. You're going to get into third and shorts. They're going to be easier to convert. Like it's going to get not as many punts. There's going to be a lot of things that happen. I think Vic Fangio is a hell of a defensive coordinator and a hell of a defensive coach. People are copycatting him all around the league. And I think even Zach would say that.
Schematically, but not in terms of coaching style. And I do think coaching style and like having your players be fired up to play for you absolutely 100% matters.
It does. I agree with you, but I mean, man, how good were the Broncos' defensive line last year? That would be my biggest question. Their defensive line and linebackers. We can talk about talent on paper, but the final product there, how good was their defensive line and linebackers last season?
Not great, and I think the talent improvements were playing a factor too. I think the defense is going to be better this year. Yes, the talent improvements are a factor there, but I think so is the fact that you're not going to be trying to monitor a mutiny for fucking 4 months.
So I agree.
You have to agree with that, though, don't you? Because we were talking about the human element is so important. And then you've got a coach coming in who the players won't even listen to. There was no strategy. There was no game plan. It was late. They couldn't, you're asking players to play a game and they can't even function under the coach for the position in which they're playing. That was a big issue. And I'm giving the point to Zach, but you can continue to argue the point.
Okay, I will, because I mean, we're sitting here talking about, we had a whole discussion about edge rushers, right? Both of our starters weren't playing, and then one of the starters that was playing, we're saying maybe be cut. Like, he may not make the team this year. We had to move our inside linebacker to his position where now he could be fifth, and he was almost the starter for the entirety of the season. We're talking about a defensive line where, I mean, friend of the show, Mike Purcell, took a step back on the interior defensive line. We saw Draymond Jones take a step back. And then what was it outside of that? I thought Shelby Harris took a step back. I didn't think the talent was there to say, where was Vic Fangio and why wasn't the defense good? I just don't think so, especially when you're looking at the injuries that happened. Ronald Darby, literally our entire linebacker core, 4 deep, to the point where we had to go trade for one and play him the next week. Like, this is what was happening, picking up guys from practice squad, coming and play. And then we're just expecting top 5 defense. Like, I don't think that's reasonable or fair.
It wasn't top 5. They were in the 20s. I know I said behind the scenes in our chat thing that I was going to give Joey last word, but I lied. So too bad. He said something that I had to respond to. Yes, there were a lot of players that mysteriously played below their level of expectation last year. That's what I'm blaming Fangio for. It was a little weird. I think some of that might have been like Shelby Harris taking a step back. Mike Purcell, I think all these players, the safety duo was nowhere near as good last year. I think some of that was KJack.
We'll have to see.
Justin Simmons was fully himself. We'll see. Defense
we'll have to see, because there are reasons for all of
Broncos family. Put the feather in my cap. This is my next Drew Lock.
Okay, I'm cutting mics. This is a fantastic conversation that I wish we could do another 30 minutes on, because, man, I think we could get heated here, but that's what we do. When we're done here, we're going to go back to, sending memes and joking around and having a great time and planning our next bowling adventure. But I'm glad they were able to duke it out. We threaten it every show. Something is going to tear us apart. Find out next on the next episode of Let's Talk Broncos. And speaking of that, you can catch us next Monday. It was fantastic to have everybody join us. Thanks for all the communications in the chat. I love that we've got different fan bases and different fanalists and analysts from different teams coming in. We've got an Eagles fan in the chat. We've got some from the MHRT crew. Just a killer time. I'm stuttering over here because I think we've just had a lot of fun tonight. So really appreciate it all. Joey and Zach, please tell the people where they can find all your work and where to catch you next.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Give me a follow at JR Drafts. Follow my writing at Mile High Sports. Those are my 2 things.
Yeah, Mile High Sports. Come back here on Monday. We'll have more coverage for you. Get ready for training camp. I've got articles coming out every day at Mile High Sports, looking at X factors, I've had a lot of questions about what are the strongest and weakest position groups. So I'm going to have a few articles coming out on that. And go check out my X Factor articles. I spent a stupid amount of time on those. That's 3,500 words of just hot takes. My Evero hot take is in there in detail. My Jonas Griffith stuff, my Caden Stearns stuff. I've got deep dives into a lot of my Broncos hot takes. So look over there.
Absolutely fantastic. As always, you can find me on Mile High Sports. The next you can hear me is Thursday, tomorrow, with the Fan Cave, 7 to 9 p.m., 98.1 FM, or you can listen live on the Mile High Sports app. Actually, download the app right now. Go look at all the articles. You can find everything on there 24/7. All the You're a Dolphins fan. Sorry about that. I mislabeled you. Same. Everyone have a good night. And